Hello, welcome back to another brand new review. My name is Michael, and I am for the very first time watching all of the original series of Star Trek, starting with season 1. Because I put out a poll not too long ago asking whether or not you would like to hear my opinions on doing Star Trek season reviews, like I have been doing with my Doctor Who series reviews every month. And a lot of you do want to see what my opinions are because, as I said, I had only seen a small handful of episodes of the original series. Um, so I was essentially been going into it not 100% blind watch, but I knew of some of this stuff obviously because some of the stuff might get mentioned in other Trek series. Um, as well, I should mention I'm watching these in production order for season 1 because that's just the way my DVDs are. They decided to, when they're doing these, they released it in production order where No Man Has Gone Before is episode 1, which technically it should be because it was the second pilot ever filmed, but they went with the man trap for the pilot episode when it was released back in 1966, which is episode 5 in the production order. As well, watching it on these DVDs, I have the original effects, none of the newer HD CGI effects. I get to see the filming model in its crisp ish way that it was supposed that I actually wanted to watch it. So with that being said, I have 29 episodes to get through. I'm hoping that this isn't going to be an hour-long video. Fingers crossed. So yeah, where No Man Has Gone Before, I like it. I definitely like the episode. It's a really good um, introduction to the show. It's the episode, where we don't see McCoy. We see a different doctor that's actually the chief medical officer on the Enterprise. But trading out McCoy, we do get to see Sulu early on, which is good. And like I said, the plot of where what two of the members of the crew get their ESP enhanced because of where they passed through, and the fact that it happened to an older vessel from like 100 or so years ago, um, was interesting. I enjoyed it. As a pilot, it's a good second pilot. I think it's better than the man trap, but we'll get to that. So the next episode is the Corbinite Maneuver, and it's an okay episode. I have nothing more to really say on it except for um the guy who runs the other ship. I know the actor from a different show, and that being My Name Is Earl, where he plays Creepy Rodney. That's the same guy that showed up in the Corbinite Maneuver. And then episode 3, Mud's Women. Now, this is a rewatch for me. This, the same with Where No Man Has Gone Before, was a rewatch for me. And whereas I enjoyed Where No Man Has Gone Before on this rewatch, Mud's Women, not that much. You see, I had watched this episode a while ago when season 1 of Discovery was airing because, in 2 episodes in Discovery, they bring in Harkon Fenton Mudd, who we see, in this episode and again in season 2, which I haven't seen the season 2 episode. I've only ever seen Mudd's Women. And I didn't like it when I first, excuse me, when I first watched it, and I don't like it now. It's a product of its time. That's all I can say with Mudd's Women. It is a product of its time. Moving on to episode 4, The Enemy Within. This is an episode that I have never seen before, so this was a first time watch for me, and I genuinely liked it. The Enemy Within is such a great episode. I did notice actually in the very beginning some continuity errors, where when Good Kirk gets beamed up, his delta on his uniform is missing, and the same with Evil Kirk. The delta for that scene in the first scene in when he gets transported back up from the planet with Sulu is, like I said, the delta is missing. But besides that, it's a fantastic episode. I think the Enemy Within walked so the Mirror Universe, or Mirror precisely in season 2, could run. Because it's kind of a similar thought process for there. The next episode, The Man Trap, as I said, it's episode 5 on these DVDs, whereas if you get like the other complete seasons and even the Blu-rays and on Netflix and Paramount Plus, it's episode 1 because it is the first episode to air, and it's a product of its time for me. You know, I've seen it a few times, and it's just not one that really interests me. I mean, as good, like, obviously it had to be good enough for people to be engaged with the show this so many, nearly 60 years later. But to me, The Man Trap just doesn't hold a candle to some of the other better episodes in season 1. But as an first episode, it's okay. The next episode on this production order is The Naked Time. Now, I knew of this not from this episode, but I did. This is a second rewatch for me. The episode that I knew it from originally was from The Next Generation, because this premise is revisited in season 1 of The Next Generation. You know, where the whole crew goes bonkers over this. You know, we see Sulu with, you know, sweating, jumping, running around the corridors of the Enterprise with his fencing sword and all that. And it's a good episode. It's one that I enjoyed, but I would classify it in the middle for me. You know, it's not one of my absolute favorites. It's one that I can enjoy or not enjoy. It depends on my mood. So yeah, that's episode 6. Moving on to Charlie X, which I believe was the second or third episode to air. I do not like this episode. I didn't like it when I first watched it, because again, it is a rewatch for me. I just did not like it, and even on this rewatch, because I've watched it I think 2 or 3 times now, I just don't like it. It feels more like Where No Man Has Gone Before to me, you know, a crappier version of that episode. Even though it aired before Where No Man Has Gone Before. But yeah, I don't know, I just did not like Charlie X. It's just one of the episodes that just unfortunately didn't jive well with me. Then the next episode after that, episode 8 on these, Balance of Terror. Now, this again is a rewatch for me, because I had actively seeked out to watch this episode, because before I even decided to finally sit down and give the original series a full chance, I had seen Balance of Terror. I actually went out and watched it, and I loved it. I loved the whole submarine aspect of it. You know, submarine warfare between the bird of prey versus the Enterprise, and I even loved the nod to this episode that they made at the end of season 1 of Strange New Worlds, where they done a what if scenario of, you know, what if Captain Pike was dealing with this. But yeah, there's not a lot more good that I can say on the Balance of Terror that hasn't already been said over the past 57 years of the show's history. The next episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of? I did not like this episode. It was a very boring episode. Very, you know, bottle-y type of way, where, you know, we do have scenes of them on the Enterprise, but it's predominantly in this cave system type thing about all these different androids, and it just did not gel well with me. I found myself tuning out a lot of what was happening and not fully paying attention because it just the story did not grasp me. I still paid some attention to it to know what was happening, but I still did not like it enough. It's one of those episodes where I'm just not going to return to, compared to some of the other episodes. So next we have Daggers of the Mind. I thought this was a pretty good episode. A good, very interesting episode. Dealing with a penal colony. I think the first time we see a penal colony. Now again, as I said, I'm going in production order. So Daggers of the Mind is episode 10 in that regards. I don't know what it is in airing order. But yeah, it's a good episode. I had a lot of fun with this episode, especially with with Kirk seeing how being under the influence of having his kind of memories erased and having these subconscious stuff put in there. The next episode after this, Miri. Now, this is an episode that I have seen half of. Now, why do I say half of? Because this is an episode I remember watching most of with my mother. Because she got into Star Trek with the original series, and then obviously went on to the others. I got into Star Trek with the Next Generation and Voyager, and I've seen all the other stuff. I haven't seen all of TNG in full. Anyway, but I do remember watching this on CBS, on Sky. Not all of it, because I kind of got bored with it. But giving it a full watch through, learning that these kids have been kids for 300 years, that as soon as they become and hit puberty, they get this disease, then it kills them, that will drive them insane and kill them. I thought that was good. Some of the child actors, weren't the best, but again, I can't necessarily fault them for that. But it was a good episode. It's one that I definitely enjoyed. The next episode, Conscience of the King, Conscientious. I'm dyslexic. I apologize if I'm butchering that. But it's the episode where this traveling trope, and it's this governor who took over a planet and killed a lot of people and kills this guy, and Kirk is one of two people left that had seen this guy. It turns out it is him. I thought it was a good mystery. I thought it was the guy who, I forget his name, Kodos or something like that. I thought it was him that was, murking off all these people that were the only people to have seen him. But I did not expect the twist that it was his daughter that was doing it. But again, it's a very good episode. It's a very good mystery and a very good whodunit type of mystery, and it's definitely one of my favorites from season 1. Next is the Galileo 7. Now, I knew of this. Did not know it was the episode title was called the Galileo 7. Now, why do I say I knew of this? Well, that's through the Star Trek Online game, where it's an online MMO where you can choose different factions. You can be a Klingon, you can be a Romulan, you can join the Dominion, and then there's 3 eras of Star Trek that you can choose from. The original series timeline, more recently added on was the Discovery timeline, and then the timeline of that, the beta canon timeline of 2401 to 24 something. And I remember playing through the original series timeline and doing the tutorial. And in the tutorial, the tutorial is based on Taurus 3. And we meet up with the yeoman who was on the Galileo 7 that crashed landed on Taurus 3, with McCoy, Spock, and Scotty, and that's how I knew of that story. And then finally getting to watch the Galileo 7 and finally fully understanding it, having experienced a version of it in Star Trek Online, I genuinely enjoyed the episode. I thought it was a good episode. Even in the Star Trek Online game, they used some of the sound effects from this episode. Like when one of the red shirts gets the spear thrown through him, they reused that in the Star Trek Online game, as well as the growls of these cavemen like people. They reused that in the Star Trek Online game, and yeah, I like the fact that Star Trek Online managed to pay homage to one of the more popular episodes, because this is the first time we do see the shuttlecraft Galileo, and then of course we'll see other shuttlecrafts named after different, I think, star systems, or I could be wrong on that one. But yeah, the Galileo 7 I thoroughly enjoyed. The next episode is Court Martial. Going into it, I didn't think I would like it. I remember in the first 15 or so minutes of it, I was watching. I was watching. It's like, okay, this seems like just a run of the mill court episode that Star Trek has done a few times. But as the episode progressed on, it started to reel me in, and because of that, I genuinely did enjoy the episode. I thought it was great. I thought it was a good episode that actually managed to build up the suspense. Especially with the footage that we see of the doctored footage of Captain killing off this lieutenant commander. So we thought, and I did not see the twist of him still being alive. The lieutenant commander that hates Kirk because of something he'd done that Kirk done as an ensign, even though Kirk had no ill will feelings towards him. Even having him serve on his ship, I thought that was a good. Like I said, I thought it was a great episode. The next two-parter for episodes 15 and 16 is the Menagerie, parts 1 and 2. Now, this is again a rewatch for me, because I had actually, when I heard of what the episode was, it was one of the few episodes that I went out of my way to watch, and I enjoyed it. I love how they incorporated the original pilot, The Cage, which I have still not seen in full, and I probably never will, because I just don't see the point when I could just stick on the Menagerie parts 1 and 2. And I love that we're getting to see, that we got to see, that Pike knew that was going to happen to him through Star Trek Discovery and obviously Strange New Worlds. I'm very happy that we're seeing more of Pike as captain, and especially love Anson Mount as Pike. But yeah, the Menagerie Part 1 and 2 I thought was a great way of tying in, reusing stock footage essentially as a cost-saving method, and it was a good idea. It was definitely a good idea to do, and it reminds me of something that I had in my head that I was supposed to say. When we see the old style phasers used in The Cage, I've noticed in a few of the episodes we see that type of phaser again used in maybe two or three episodes, which it's good. The fact that they were able to reuse that prop essentially. But yeah, there's not much more again that I can say on the Menagerie parts 1 and 2 that hasn't already been said. It's a fantastic episode, and as I said, a great cost-saving episode. I mean, they go on to do versions of, not necessarily versions of this in future Trek, but we see a version of it in Deep Space Nine's Trials and Tribulations. as well as the Star Trek Voyager episode, Flashback, where you obviously know the episode. Moving on, Shore Leave. Dear God, I thought this was an episode I was going to hate. I genuinely thought this was an episode I was going to hate. I watched the beginning of it and I thought, this is a weird episode. And it is a weird episode, don't get me wrong. Shore Leave is a weird fucking episode. But okay, so my phone died when I recorded the first 20 minutes of this video. And I didn't know or notice until after I had finished the review. So it's now the next day from when I originally had filmed. I wasn't sure how much of the review was filmed, but thankfully I know exactly where we left off, and that was Shore Leave, the episode Shore Leave, which is episode 17 in production order. Now, as I was saying, this episode is a weird episode, but weird in a good way. Because I thought I wasn't going to like this episode. With the way it started off in the beginning, I was like, oh, this seems like a really, really weird, bad episode. I doubt that I'm going to like it. But as the episode played out, I was like, oh, I actually really like this episode. It's weird, yes, but weird in a good way. Seeing that, whatever a particular crewman is thinking of at that given time, it magically appears, and just seeing how that plays off, but also seeing them film in the same location that they film in the episode Arena, show up in this episode. But yeah, like I said, Shore Leave, really good episode. I really, really enjoyed it, despite how weird it actually is. So the next episode in production order is the Squire of Gothos. Now, this is an episode I had seen nearly in full before I watched this video, because one of the times I was staying up at my cousin's house, my aunt, who's also a Star Trek fan, was watching the original series, and this episode played. So I definitely missed bits of the beginning when I had first watched it, so it technically is a rewatch for me, but it's still a good episode. It introduces us to the character of Tralee, who, even though it's not main canon that he's a Q, but he uses Q-like powers before Q even was a thing. And I do know in the book universe of Star Trek, in beta canon, there is a book where Q goes to Captain Picard and asks him to help deal with Tralee, who is a renegade Q like himself. But yeah, it's a good episode. I genuinely really did enjoy it. I thought it, I liked the character of Tralee. I do like the theory that he's a Q. I do 100% think he is a Q, and I don't count the ending as 100% canon. I think though his parents that took him back to wherever it is he came from, I think they're Qs, and he was going back to the Q continuum. But let me know what you think of the theory that Tralee is a Q. Speaking of Arena, I just briefly mentioned it. That is the next episode to cover, episode 19. Now, obviously, I was well aware of this episode beforehand, before I even watched this episode, because I've seen clips, of Kirk versus the Gorn and using his Kirk Fu, and they obviously make reference to this episode a lot in mainly just other media. But I knew of the planet that they were on, because again, in Star Trek Online, which you should be seeing some footage of, in Star Trek Online, in the beta canon TOS timeline, you go to that planet and you have to deal with the Gorn, where both Federation and Gorn hegemony are trying to go peacefully to take a lot, to divide up the minerals because it is a minerally rich planet. And then it also, the level involves Romulans destroying a Gorn ship, and then you eventually team up with the Gorn. So that's how I knew of the planet. Now, the Gorn design itself, I do love. Out of the 3 designs that I know of, not including the little ones in the Strange New World Season 1, I think that this is a good design. This Gorn design is really, really good. The Gorn design, CGI Gorn design that we see in A Mirror Darkly Part 2 in Season 4 of Enterprise isn't the best, but then the more modernized version of the Gorn that we see in Star Trek Online through either playing as Klingons, because if you play through the Klingon storyline, you can choose to play as a Gorn, or just in playing at the time, what still is beta canon 2401 timeline, you do have some interactions with the Gorn in a mission. Though that version of the Gorn is my personal favorite. But yeah, I genuinely did like Arena. Tiny bit overrated though. Just a smidge, not overly overrated, but as a first watch for me, I still enjoyed it, but it is just a smidge overrated. Next we have the alternative factor. This episode sucks. I'm not gonna lie, this episode sucks. As I was watching it unfold, I'm like, this is so boring. And I barely paid attention to the episode. I paid more attention to the ending, and I was still able to catch up with what I wasn't as, able to fully understand the story. These two Lazarus A and Lazarus B. They're fighting each other from 2 parallel timelines, and it's ripping stuff through subspace and all that. And one of them steals 2 dilithium crystals to power up his ship. The Lazarus B, who's the more insane one, does it to kind of counteract it, and it ends when Kirk destroys the ship, and they're both stuck fighting each other forever. And yeah, I managed to get all of that just from the last 15 or so minutes of the episode, of a nearly 50-minute episode. Yeah, it's the alternative factor is not a great episode by any means. But what is a good episode is the next one after that, again in production-wise order, and that is Tomorrow is Yesterday, episode 21. I knew of this episode, just not what actively happened in this episode. How did I know of this episode beforehand? Well, I'd seen comparison shots from the original footage, from 1966/67, as well as, the HD remastered shots that they done for the Blu-ray and all of that. Yeah, great episode. I think Tomorrow's Yesterday is a fantastic episode, and the first of the time travel episodes to feature in Star Trek. Seeing them go back to the 60s, having to deal with not being seen, and the ship did get seen, but in order to preserve the timeline, with the temporal prime directive, which isn't mentioned because it wasn't a thing yet, and so on and so forth. Great episode. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It kept me engrossed from beginning to end. Moving on to episode 22, The Return of the Archons. I liked it. I thought it was a good episode. With Landru, the computer, and all, having these guys convinced, and of body and mind, that type of stuff. I thought it was a good episode, from beginning to end, as a mystery of sorts, and having to deal with all of that aspect. I thought it was a good episode. it's it'll be one that I return to not as often as some of the other episodes in this season, but it is definitely one that I probably will return to, just not as soon. Following that is A Taste of Armageddon, which, again, this is another episode that I have heard of before watching this. I had heard of, how this episode was, where Kirk is bringing, the crew of the Enterprise is bringing this diplomat to this planet that's at war with another planet, and it's all done by computers, and if you're selected as one of the computerized casualties, you then have to go and commit yourself to disintegration, which doesn't take too kindly to Kirk, and he sets out to sabotage that, which would then lead to them using actual weapons on each other, for the first time in 500 years. And he done this just so it could also be a way to open up dialogue with these people for peace. Finally, after 500 years of war, that we have peace. Now, there's arguments of ethics and all that of, was Kirk right to do this? Was he wrong to do it? Yes, it did lead to peace, but does the ends justify the means? That's the way I thought of it walking away from this episode. But still, A Taste of Armageddon is excellent. Really, really good episode. The next episode is Space Seed. Overrated. Space Seed, I'm sorry, like the Wrathacon, is overrated. Now, I watched this episode after I've obviously seen Wrathacon, because trying to get into Star Trek, for me, the original series, took a while. I was able to do it, finally, obviously because I'm doing this review, but Space Seed to me, as on the first watch and this rewatch, just overrated. I don't know. It was, again, built up for me. It was overhyped, and when I went in with the highest of expectations for Space Seed, and it did not meet them. But again, that's not discrediting the a lot of the people that worked on it. Still a good episode. It still in a sense deserves the high praise that it gets. Ricardo Montalban is excellent as Khan. I've never had an issue with him as Khan. Because I mainly grew up with him as the grandfather in the Spy Kids trilogy. And that's as far as I'm counting with the Spy Kids movies. Anything after Spy Kids 3, I don't count. Anyway, yeah, good episode. Just vastly overrated. But we're getting to the end here, and we have next episode 25, This Side of Paradise. Now, I had seen one clip of this episode before even watching it, where the flower infects Spock with the pollen, and I knew that this is where he would become more in tone with his emotion side of him. And I again went into this episode after watching the cold open, thinking this is an episode that I'm not gonna like. But by the end of the episode, I fell in love with it. I think this Side of Paradise is a fantastic episode. It's it keeps you on your feet of all the crew are infected. They've all been down to this planet. And Kirk's the only one left. How is he going to do this? How is he going to save the day and rescue his crew as well as the colonists on this planet? And I love that Kirk essentially had to get Spock mad in order to free him, because that's what it is. It's high intensity of emotions when frees you from the pollen and that. And as I was watching that scene of Kirk basically calling Spock every half-breed name under the sun, I was reminded of the scene from the 2009 Star Trek movie, where Kirk essentially had to say to, Calvin Spock that he has no emotions and that he didn't love his mother, and that, and obviously caused the fight in there. And yeah, I thought, like I said, This Side of Paradise, fantastic episode. It's probably my top 5 for sure of my favorite episodes from this season. Following that up, we have The Devil in the Dark. Now, I again knew of this episode before I went into this episode, for 2 reasons. Number 1 is behind me, and it is this Spock with the Horta, that my cousin bought my mother over in America as a Hallmark Christmas ornament, which I hope you can still see the hook there. And then of course you have Spock mind melding with the Horta, and you also have here No Kill Eye. And so that's how I knew of this episode. One of the ways I knew of this episode. The other way that I knew of this episode was from the Young Sheldon TV series, where it shows clips from this episode. And so I knew of it. I knew why the Horta was killing these people, but that did not take away from my enjoyment of The Devil in the Dark. I thought it was a fantastic episode, really, really great, and it's definitely, again, definitely my top 5 for sure. Potentially top 10, I don't know. Really, really good. Really, really glad that I watched it. Next, we get to Errand of Mercy. Now, this is the very first episode to introduce the Klingons, and it was okay. They get informed that they're again going to war with the Klingon Empire, and that the Klingon Empire is going to this planet to take it over as a strategic, in a strategic way, and all of that stuff. And it was just okay. It wasn't really built up to me. I knew of the episode going into that they were at war, and then the people of the planet managed to prevent the war from going on further. Bringing back the peace and that. And yeah, it just was okay. But now we're getting down to the last 2 episodes of this season. And the second last episode is The City on the Edge of Forever. Now, this episode, like with Space Seed and like with Wrath of Khan, was built up so much to me. The hype built up. The City on the Edge of Forever is one of the best episodes of Star Trek. It's really, really good, yada, yada, yada. I had not seen it prior to this. I had obviously heard of it, especially with The Guardian of Forever, because of the Star Trek, the animated series. One of the early episodes does feature The Guardian of Forever in the animated series. And then, of course, the Guardian of the Forever shows up in season 3 of Discovery. And I really tried to go in to this episode once I knew I was at this point. I really tried to go in with very low expectations, and I still loved it. I still love it. City on the Edge of Forever is by far the best Star Trek original series episode. I'm not sure where I would put it in grand scheme of things of the other Trek shows. But yeah, The City on the Edge of Forever deserves all the praise that it gets. It is chef's kiss. Fantastic episode. Can't sing enough praises on it. I was engrossed from beginning to end. Ended a little bit too quickly for me. I thought it was going to build up a bit more to the eventual end of the episode. That's my only gripe with it, but it's still a fantastic episode. And now we get to episode 29, Operation Annihilate. Now, I was somewhat aware of this episode for three reasons. The first two are kind of intertwined. I had seen some scenes of it with my mother on CBS. She explained kind of what it was about, with Sam Kirk being Kirk's brother and dying, and that, and then once again with Star Trek Online, because after you deal with the Gorn in Star Trek Online, you have to go to Space Station K3. There are two other ships that are having the exact same problem as Operation Annihilate are having. The same with over in K3. So I knew the way to stop these creatures was through UV ultraviolet light. So I knew about that going into it. But did that take away from my enjoyment? No. It's still a good episode. Not the best series finale of a Trek show, but it's still a good episode. And that is going to wrap up my review for Season 1 of Star Trek, the original series. I had a lot of fun, going through, spending the past week and a bit going through this show and watching at least 2 or 3 episodes a day, essentially, just trying to get it to the point where I could, get to this point where I can finish this video. Now, I apologize for how long this has gone. I don't know how long it's actually gone, because I'm not looking at the back of the phone. I'm recording from the back of the phone, so I don't know exactly how long this video is until I throw it into the editing software. I had a lot of fun. Season 1 of the original series is good. A lot of duds. A lot of episodes to me that were just okay. Very few that were actually really, really bad. But I had a lot of fun doing it. I had a lot of fun, experiencing Star Trek the original series. Not necessarily for the first time, because a few of these episodes were a rewatch. Some that I already knew of beforehand, before even getting into it. But yeah, so next month, at the end of June, I will of course be coming back with Season 2 of the original series. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Again, I apologize for the video length, and I'll see you all next